Welcome to Crisis in the Middle East, Alternatives to War. We're very pleased that you joined Juan today for this presentation. My name is Edzi Vokiwa. I am a Senior Program Associate at WAND, and I will be running the technology today. Before we get started with the presentation, just a few housekeeping items. All attendees will be muted during the presentation. When it's time for questions, please submit your questions for the presenters by typing them into the questions section of your panel. It should be on the right-hand side of your computer screen. I'll ask those questions out loud to our presenters after they finish their presentations. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact GoToWebinar support directly. Their phone number is 1-800-263-6317. And now, without any further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Scher, WAND's Executive Director. Susan?
Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad that you are here a day after Veterans Day, which is very fitting. I wanted to say just a little bit about WAND and why we are talking about women, peace, and security, particularly in this region of the world. After the Iraq War so-called ended, which I guess it didn't, we at WAND, who had opposed that war, were very distressed about the fact that peace did not continue. And there's so much evidence now that shows that if women are not at the tables where the peacemaking happens and where the peace building and civil society building happens after a major conflict, then there will be no success. There will be no democracy. There will be no civil society. There will be no peace. So we became very involved in what was happening in Afghanistan, and now as the war was winding down, how the United States could be better encouraging of having women at those tables where the decisions are made. So this is an alternative to how you make peace, because that's something that we are very interested in. On the other hand, we're also interested in what the alternatives to war are. In fact, with Veterans Day just behind us, we also work on the federal budget issues and whether or not we take care of our veterans and whether or not we think about what's going to happen after a war and our veterans, how we have to take care of them, and as you'll now learn, how we take care of the women in those war-torn countries where we've been involved and how can make it better. So I'm going to introduce to you the two people who will be speaking today. Kathy Robinson is our Senior Public Policy Director in our Washington, D.C. office. She's been with WAND for over 6 years, but she's been working in the peace and security community her entire, not only adult life, but as a college student. So she's been doing this for decades and is a lawyer. So she is very competent when it comes to all the policy issues and somebody who really understands the ins and outs of Congress, which is obviously very important right now. And the other person who is going to be speaking is our Women, Peace, and Security person in the Washington, D.C. office, Julie Arostegui. And Julie is also a lawyer. I don't know why I mentioned the lawyer business, but it seems to really make people sit up and take notice. But the other thing you should notice about Julie is that she's been doing human rights issues for 18 years. And for 4 of those years, recently, she's been working specifically on women, peace, and security in post-conflict areas and how the U.S. can be involved in making that happen. She has been used to, in all her entire years of working, on looking at all these public policy issues through the gender lens. So today we're looking at the crisis in the Middle East, alternatives to war, and definitely through a gender lens. So let's get to it.
Okay, now we'll be hearing from Kathy Robinson. Kathy?
Sorry, actually I thought that we were going to go directly to Julie, but here's the agenda of what we're going to cover today on the call. We're going to start with building a path to peace and the alternatives, and we're going to look at what the women are saying. And then we're going to focus a bit on what you can do to help build a path to peace, and how now is really the particular moment to engage with Congress. And then we'll have plenty of time, probably 20 to 30 minutes for your questions and your additions to the conversation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it right over to Julie.
Sorry, just give us a moment. We're switching computers. Okay. All right, here we go. Sorry for that delay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. This is really such an important topic. We've been talking so much about not going back to war, but really we felt we needed to educate people on the alternatives, because it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people to say this needs to be stopped. What ISIS is doing is awful, and we need to do something about it, but there's a knee-jerk reaction of looking at force as a way to do that, and there really are a lot of alternatives, so we wanted to talk about that today. And Susan gave a good background on the Women, Peace, and Security program here and the issues. Something I'd just like to say, and I say this to everybody I talk to, is that Women, Peace, and Security is not just about women's issues. As Susan mentioned, it's about inclusive peace that brings to the table the voices of parties that can help shed light on pathways to actual sustainable peace. There's a tendency for women, peace, and security to get kind of siloed as women's issues. In fact, in a recent conversation with a U.S. diplomat and Iraqi representative of civil society, the U.S. representative was very focused on how you balance the, quote, distraction of security situation with the goals of the women, peace, and security agenda. But, I really stress that this is not just about women's issues that need to be dealt with later after we secure the situation. What she didn't get, and what a lot of people don't get, is that what we're talking about is how to address the security situation in ways that will actually lead to peace and benefit everyone. And it's so important that we listen to the voices of the women on the ground, and I'm really happy today to be able to share them with you so that you can help me amplify them. In recent months, I've been talking to women from Iraq, Syria, and Jordan, among other countries, about the conflict in the Middle East and possible solutions from their point of view. In both Iraq and Syria, women have been at the forefront of advocating for peace, reaching across political, ethnic, and religious divides to bring communities together, and addressing the root social causes that are causing the rise in violent extremism, which is really an important factor to look at. And women in both countries have made it clear that they want peace without more violence and without more arms. Some of the key points they tell us is that in Syria, 3.5 years of civil war have gotten them nowhere, and further arming the opposition will not help. What Syrians need is for the flow of weapons from all sides to stop, and for foreign fighters to stop entering the country. In Iraq, they tell us that previous U.S. military interventions have only brought destruction, and 11 years of divisive policies that have also been supported by the U.S. For sectarianism, which is politics based on religious sect, has nurtured hatred between Sunni and Shia, and hatred for also what many consider to be U.S. imperialism, which makes it easy for groups like ISIS to recruit young fighters. They say the continuing force and emphasis on military solutions is not the answer. There must be political solutions, and we really need strong international efforts engaging the United Nations and international and regional partners that focus on unified economic and diplomatic strategies. So what are some of these strategies? So first, it's really important that we address the immediate humanitarian assistance and protection needs.
there are millions of Iraqis and Syrians who have been displaced from their homes, and their needs are enormous. Some of them are displaced within their countries, and many have become refugees in neighboring countries. And they really, of course, they need basic life-sustaining supplies such as food, water, shelter. Winter is coming, so of course everybody's very concerned about what will happen. And it's also really critical that they have support services such as health care, legal services, and psychosocial support. These people have been not only displaced, but they've been through a tremendous amount of trauma, and it's really important to pay attention to that and give them support. And women especially are affected in displaced settings. They are more susceptible to violence. They're often needing to protect their families, and they're generally quite vulnerable in these situations. The women tell us it's really important to support the civil society organizations and the women's groups who are working on the ground with those who have been displaced from their homes. A lot of money does go through the governments, but there are issues with government corruption, of course, so that aid is not reaching those in need. And they're also, where governments are making efforts, their capacities are just not enough to deal with the number of people that have been displaced. And, it's the groups on the grounds that really understand the needs, not only, as I mentioned, the immediate life-sustaining needs, but the kind of services and support that displaced people, and especially women and children, need. One of our civil society activists that we've been working with lately has opened legal clinics in some of the camps for displaced persons, and this is critical because people are here without documentation, without any of their identification. They can't get services. Again, you have women, children, and others who are victims of violence who need help, and they also need, as I mentioned, the psychosocial supports. And also, another activist talked about the role of women as peace builders within the camps, because as you have the sectarian issues generally affecting the region, you also have within the camps, you have different sectarian groups trying to live together, and that's really difficult when they've been so divided. So women really have been working to keep peace even within camps where they're displaced. It's really important that we help support neighboring countries who have taken in refugees. Here you can see a map of the region. Jordan especially has been very affected. Recently has spent time with women from Jordan in a few different settings, and the country is really physically in the middle of a lot of conflict between Syria, Iraq, and Israel, Gaza. So they're we're already dealing with a large amount of refugees, but with the current crisis, they're a third of their country is now refugees, and it's hard enough to feed their own population and sustain their own population. And now they have to deal with so many refugees. So it's really important to assist them and help with services and also economic opportunities to provide stability so that the conflict doesn't spill over into Jordan and other countries. They also tell us that they're really on high alert. There are police and military everywhere. So it's really a concern that this is going to spill over into the rest of the region. And the people have expressed a lot of concern that donor governments are not meeting their pledges on assistance, partly because they're focusing so much on military. Sorry, I was just getting a note that people are having a hard time hearing me. Hopefully this is better. So it's really important that the UN and the international community ensure that these pledges of humanitarian assistance and funding are met. So some of the ways to stop the violence. One, we need to cut off support for ISIS and other sectarian groups. we need to cut off their funding streams. The U.S. and the international community must work to restrict ISIS access to the international financial system. So we need to follow the money, and we need to stop it. The U.S. should cut off government contracts with anyone doing business with ISIS. One major problem is that ISIS is controlling areas of oil production, so it's important for the international community and governments in the region to work to stem their ability to sell this oil and profit from it. The women delegations who have visited are also requesting the international community to take responsibility for preventing foreign citizens from entering these countries to join rebel groups, which is critical because so many are coming from other countries. Recently, there was a delegation of Syrian women that said, so many of the fighters in the country are actually international citizens from other countries. So it's really important to stop that. We've heard reports even here in the U.S. of people being recruited to go over and join ISIS. And that also means we need to look at the root causes of the popular support for ISIS. ISIS has really strong recruitment tactics. They're very savvy. They're on social media. They give money. They give mobile phones. They give all kinds of promises to people who will come and fight with them. And I'll talk a little bit more about social and economic empowerment in a little bit. But there's all the years of sectarianism and disenfranchisement, and people who have felt powerless and angry are easily recruited by these kinds of groups. So really, really key to look behind the doors at the root causes. Third, we need to stop the flow of arms. The availability of weapons only increases the militarization and violence, including gender-based violence in society. And as long as the arms continue to flow, the violence will continue to flow. It seems that we have not learned from our past mistakes. Arming the Syrian rebels is dangerous. Those whom we might consider to be our friends today could become our opponents in the future. And the Taliban in Afghanistan is a key case in point. In addition, ISIS is now fighting with U.S. weapons, so putting our weapons into circulation makes them obtainable by these other groups. And the delegations are really pleading with us to ask the U.S. government and the United Nations to stop this. We also need to put more emphasis on ceasefire negotiations and local peace-building initiatives. The international community must maintain pressure on parties in Syria to return to negotiations, which really must be inclusive in order to build a sustainable political transition. Of course, this means that women should be a part of all talks. So we need to get the parties back to the table. We also need to support local ceasefire negotiations. There have been some successes of ceasefires on a local level in communities where they've been able to stop the conflict and allow for the flow of humanitarian aid, allow for students to go to school, allow for life to return at least a little bit to normal. And women have been at the forefront of these efforts, one, because this is often what they do, and also because they're often seen as less threatening and are able to move more freely about. So they have a little bit more self-legal wiggle room, so to speak. In fact, the Syrian women recently recommended focusing on local peace-building efforts to the UN Special Envoy de Mistura, who this week issued a statement in support of such efforts. So it's really important not only to look, kind of at the big picture, global, regional level, but also what we can do, what can be done, and what we can support at the local levels. It's also really critical that we look at long-term conflict prevention measures. Again, like I said, the knee-jerk reaction is often airstrikes, dropping bombs, showing force, but that doesn't get to why conflicts are happening and how to prevent them in the future. So some of the issues that women have brought up is, one, legal frameworks. And this is really important. Addressing equality and discrimination is critical. In countries where discrimination and violence against women are validated by law, such as in Iraq and Syria and others in the region, misogynistic attitudes are continued to be allowed and fostered, and this really makes them environments that are ripe for violent extremism, and especially the kind of tactics that we're seeing ISIS use against women. So these laws need to be changed, and there need to be laws in place to fight corruption and impunity and to bring perpetrators to justice. And again, sometimes when you're in the throes of conflict, these things seem, kind of like things that we need to deal with down the road. But these are critical issues that women are bringing up. And in Iraq, there's a new government, and people are wary given the past 11 years and the sectarianism. But there is some hope that there could be some changes. So it's really important to support the people that are working on those changes. And I'll just mention that in Iraq, they have this year created a national action plan on women, peace, and security. They're the first in the Arab world to have one. And the women are asking our help in ensuring that the government implements it. So that's another key aspect. Social and economic empowerment is critical, both for women to empower them, but for the society as a whole. Like I said, really looking at some of the root causes of what's going on with the sectarianism, with disenfranchisement, with youth who have grown up in societies where they don't have opportunities, where they're being oppressed. So it's really important to, again, address those issues and really look at the long-term, both the past problems and the long-term solutions to those. Investment in civil society is critical. Susan said it. Civil society is really key to building peace. Civil society activists are instrumental in standing up in the midst of violence, in building consensus among disparate groups, in demanding dignity and rights, and in shaping the futures of their countries, all of which are much more effective than using weapons. And they're often more effective with money, as I mentioned. Often funding goes to governments, and a lot of the funding stays with the government and doesn't get to the people that really need it. And also, civil society, women, people who are involved in their communities really know what's happening on the ground, and so they really have the best solutions to offer. And of course, allowing women to have a voice in all negotiations and peace processes is critical. That's what I work for. That's what Juan works for. And as Susan stated, it's if women in all sectors of society are not included, there will be no peace, and any agreements will fail. And it's important to work within the region to establish political solutions. This absolutely has to be the number one priority, is working towards political solutions, and it's incumbent not just on the U.S. and its allies, but countries in the region to work towards solutions that will really create stability in the region. And this is Ms. Suad Alami, a women's rights lawyer from Iraq. She's founder and director of Women for Progress Center in Iraq. And she, WAND is a member of the NGO Working Group for Women, Peace, and Security, which advocates the UN Security Council. And last week, what was it last week? Two weeks ago? October 28th, the UN Security Council held its annual open debate on women, peace, and security in celebration of the anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. And Suad did a stellar job in representing civil society. And as she says, conflict prevention lies at the core of the women, peace, and security agenda, and all solutions must address the root causes of conflict and displacement. This includes addressing disarmament and demilitarization, gender equalities, and investing in women's rights, equality, economic empowerment, education, and women-led civil society. Militarization and arms proliferation fuel conflict by directly and indirectly killing and impacting civilians. So I think she sums it up very well there. And hopefully I've given you some alternatives to think about, and I'm happy to answer any questions and certainly being in touch with everyone after the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Now we're going to hear from Kathy Robinson. We'll just give Kathy a moment to get set up.
Hi, everybody. So I'm just trying to move on to the next slide here. I am going to talk about Juan's middle name now, which is action, and specifically what we can do at the moment to influence Congress as they're back in session after being on the election trail. And as you may have heard recently, the President has been asking Congress, saying we're going to develop a plan and we do want you to give us an authorization of use of military force for Iraq and Syria. At the same time, we're also sending in more troops, training troops, but on the ground troops. And you may have noticed that the language keeps shifting a little bit. You know, initially we were not sending in ground troops. Now we're not sending in combat troops. So the language is shifting. There has been an enormous amount of money already sought for this foray of activity, the bombing strikes and so forth, and the President is also coming back to ask for more money as the Congress is in session here. And so the Congress has been a way, of course, you know, trying to get a renewed job contract, and some of them were more successful than others. But everybody from the last Congress is back for a few weeks here, at least, to do some of the critical work, and they will be debating this issue. It was unfortunately not an issue that was very much debated in many of the election campaign issues, but already there are hearings planned. There's one hearing within the Senate Foreign Relations Committee tonight, which is a closed hearing, but tomorrow there will be open hearings on the House side in the House Armed Services Committee. And Congress will be talking also about money and the budget, covering the appropriations for this fiscal year, which they didn't quite get done before they left. And so now is really a critical opportunity to talk to Congress about what's going on in Iraq and Syria and what the alternatives for the track that we're on could be. So what could Congress be doing at this moment? One is really insisting that they have a voice in this debate, and it seems like that is starting to come, but I think that you know, the President has given little piecemeal bits of it, and the Congress really needs to be a little bit more aggressive in taking authority to really engage in this debate. And maybe they're more likely to do that now that they're not focused on their election fight. One thing that we have seen that Juan really likes, that a number of our other organizations are supporting, is the HCON Resolution 114, which is offered by the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which requires Congress to have a debate and vote, and then it really constrains U.S. military intervention in Iraq and Syria. The other thing is just to support any other measures that are going to help to prohibit U.S. ground troops and sunset the current, you know, lengthy, kind of all-encompassing authorization of use of military force from 2001 and 2002. A few things have changed since then. Because it's such a critical time with old Congress coming back to begin to debate this issue, we chose this week, along with a number of our colleague organizations, about 20 peace and justice organizations that are working together to take opportunities to tell Congress to end the bombing and take action for a political solution in the crisis in Syria and Iraq. And we're really happy to be participating. This will not be the only chance to sort of participate in activities, but this week is an important one, and we have particularly a number of activities that Juan is focusing on tomorrow. And one of them is a call-in. This is one of our hashtags, our message, EndEndlessWar, and war isn't working. One of the things that we're helping to organize is a thunderclap. And hopefully many of you have participated in a thunderclap before. It's an opportunity for you to sign up, to join with the rest of the community that signs up, to send this message out, and you can modify it a little bit if you want to, on your social media so that you get this really, all of a sudden, this thunderclap of social media messages coming at people. So to tell you, so this is where we were earlier today. Maybe we've even surpassed 200 people who have signed up for the thunderclap. But you can see from these 197 people, we have a social reach of over 217 to almost 218,000 people. So we want to keep that growing. You can sign up to do this anytime before noon Eastern time tomorrow, and then your message will go all at once with everybody else's on your Twitter and on your Facebook and however else you can do it through a blog, a Tumblr, that kind of thing. We also are working with our great partners, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, that have set up a special call-in number. And if you use this number to call your members of Congress and tell them war isn't working, it's time to end the endless war, they will be able to help track with this number how many people are calling and from which states you're calling. So that's really helpful to our overall team effort to know how many folks are weighing in on this issue. We, in addition, have an alert coming today to give you a little call script for what to say when you call your members of Congress on that 1-800 number, and to explain to you more about how to participate in our thunderclap and the links and all of that to help you to do that. I also wanted to highlight the Win Without War Alternatives to Airstrikes. We helped put this together with a group of 20 organizations. I'm going to try and see if I can get it to come up. Perhaps not. Here we go. So you can see that. And then I have to get back to my PowerPoint, but technology is not always my friend. Well, we're going to go with a small screen. So in sum, we're right now sort of working in the situation where we have Congress using its typical hammer, the President using his hammer of military intervention. We really need to move to using our full toolbox so that we can build a path to peace, because we know that war isn't working, hasn't worked, and won't work. I wanted to leave you with the screens of more information from Julie and from me. And we will send these out as well as the recording, and then this is Juan. So with that, I think we are ready to turn it over to questions. Betsy, are you ready?
Sure. Just wanted to remind everyone how to ask questions if you haven't yet done so. You should have a question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And type those questions in the box, and I will ask them out loud to our presenters. So our first question is from Susan Cundiff. Susan says, one of the root causes in Syria is the drought and the influx of huge people moving into other areas. The cities didn't have ways to support them with food and shelter, etc. So how do we address that need? And Julie, maybe, I don't know if you want to tackle that one.
Yes, so again, like I was saying, obviously, Susan, definitely, you know, the different countries, Syria, Jordan, they're not equipped to handle all these influxes of people, and that's where we really need to focus a lot of our efforts and assistance in helping them. You know, certainly there's a lack of infrastructure. For instance, in Jordan, you know, there's desert. They don't have enough water even for their own people, so now they have all these additional people that they need to work with. But really the international community needs to focus on these kinds of structural needs, as well as, as I said, the support services that the people need in these countries. So, you know, it's not just a matter of spending money. It's really looking at what the problems are, working with the groups on the ground who are addressing them and helping to support them.
Thank you, Julie. Our next question is from Jody Evans. Jody asks, what are specific civil society groups within Iraq and Syria that we can support?
So there are several organizations, and I would be happy to send a list of you know, organizations that we've been talking with and that we've been working with to people who are interested in them. There's the Slaughter City legal clinic that I mentioned that Suad Alami is a part of. Amar has been doing a lot of work in the region, and there are several other groups which I'd be happy to share with people.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful. Betsy Kreitz asks, I've seen very little news coverage of the refugee situation. Is that your observation as well? Should we focus more on that as a way to get Congress to at least push for alternatives?
I think that's a good question. You know, when you work in this field, you feel like you're kind of surrounded by all this information, but it's good to get the outside perspective that you know, probably the broader public is not seeing this information. And yeah, so I'd say the more that that's one of the reasons that we want to you know, educate our members about the different alternatives and the situations on the ground, because the more that you can help us to get the word out and focus on the issues and also these alternative solutions, the better. So yes, please do.
All right. Our next question is from Elaine Noneman. Elaine asks, how can we tie the Women, Peace, and Security Act to measures for reaching a political solution to conflict?
Well, thanks, Elaine. Of course, I think that this is more critical than ever. The Women, Peace, and Security Act was introduced in the current Congress, and it gives oversight to the U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security, which is a government-wide policy to ensure that all of our diplomatic, defense, and development efforts are including women and gender perspectives. And the WPS Act would give Congress oversight. So we now have a policy in place, but that can change, and there are also issues with enforcement. The Women, Peace, and Security, or WPS Act, would give Congress oversight and also ensure reports from federal agencies, and again ensure that women and gender perspectives are included in all of our efforts. And I think we've been discussing that now that our elections are over and we're heading into new Congress. This is a real key opportunity to build a movement behind this. And show that it's really, as I was saying before, this is really looking at broad solutions for peace. It's not just about women's issues. It's looking at how we can really find a better pathway to peace. And I think the more that we can educate the public and educate members of Congress about why this is important and how this could change the way we do things is really key.
All right. Our next question is one I think, I'm not sure if Kathy, you might want to weigh in here as well. So what are the chances of preventing President Obama from sending more troops into Iraq? And specifically as activists, what can we do to help encourage the president not to send more troops into Iraq?
Well, I think that the key thing is to really start speaking up about this. And I think that the president has set sort of a clear policy at this point, but Congress hasn't really said what it thinks. I mean, they've really been so distracted by the election. So that's why for this week, as Congress is back, we're really focusing on getting the message to them. But I think the broader point is to really hear from the American public more, both Congress and the President. And you might remember it was a little over a year ago when we were poised to go into Syria at that time, and all of a sudden there was really a groundswell of voices from the people, and Congress heard, and the President did change his mind about what to do next in Syria. And I think that really seeing some of the alternatives and how they can work better and create a more sustainable path towards peace and security is important. And that's one of the reasons why we really wanted to emphasize what some of the alternatives are and to start talking about that, because unfortunately, we see this just happening over and over again, and it's just like, okay, we have another conflict erupting, let's get out the hammer again, and it's not working. We know it's not working. And I think, even though there is great concern about the situation in Syria and Iraq with ISIS, this is a threat the American people are concerned about. I think that we also are smart enough to know that this repeated reaction is not working and that we need to find alternatives. So I think just beginning to raise our voices about this is really important right now.
All right. I think this question is probably more for Julie. Julie, who are the most prominent supporters of the Women, Peace, and Security Act in Congress? And what do you think are its chances in the new iteration of Congress that will be starting next year?
Well, in the Senate, it has been championed by Senators Boxer, Kirk, and Shaheen. And in the House, it was introduced by Representative Schakowsky, Honda, and it currently has 30 co-sponsors in the House. The Senate side has remained just with the three original sponsors. On the House, we have 30 Democrats right now. But we've seen in other areas, for instance, with the International Violence Against Women Act, there has been a broad movement to get more bipartisan support. And in fact, Chairman Royce of the House Foreign Affairs Committee has signed on to that. So I think there are opportunities, to look at some more bipartisan support for it, which is obviously critical if we want to move it forward.
Okay, our next question is from Josie Haddon. Josie asks, how do you respond to the attitude that women, peace, and security is a quote-unquote distraction to be dealt with later?
Yes, thank you. As I mentioned, I've been dealing with that recently, and I really just emphasize to people again that this is not, I think the label, and this has been a discussion in the community lately, the label of women, peace, and security maybe also makes it sound like women's issues. And while they do encompass women's rights and women's inclusion and decision-making and all peacemaking processes and the protection of women and children in conflict, as I said, and I always emphasize to people, this is about bringing voices to the table who are giving us alternatives, whether it be, for countering violent extremism, for dealing with gender-based violence, working with peace processes, looking at what's happening in communities. Women often, they're kind of like intel on the ground. They know what's happening with their children who are, sometimes being recruited through social media. They know when their arms being built up. They know when the people are their husbands are. Sometimes it's women that go off to fight too. They really see what's going on. So I really emphasize that while there are issues that need to be addressed as far as women's rights within this agenda, it's really about bringing that perspective that benefits all of us. And it's not something, if we're talking about security, again, it's not just about sending some troops in and having some bombs. It's looking at the root causes and real solutions. And so we need to have all the voices there, and that's really so critical. And so it's how we deal with it now.
Well, on that note, our next question is, what are some examples of places where women being at the table has helped to counter extremism?
Well, there are many, actually. We hear from women on the ground, even at the local levels. Even if it's just knowing that they're working with the youth, understanding that the youth are vulnerable to these issues, and reaching out, whether to be their children or other youth within the community, and working with them, establishing programs of empowerment, whether it be for youth, for women, for other parts of the community, reaching across some of the political and ethnic divides. And as I said, we've seen some localized peace negotiations and ceasefires that have been brought about by women being able to bridge those divides, at least momentarily.
All right, we have a few more questions here. Our next one is for Kathy. Is President Obama's request for Congress to decide on more troops the same as a full debate on decision to go to war?
Well, that's a good question, and the answer is that it's still a bit unclear. We haven't seen the full package that the President is going to put together and what he's going to ask of Congress. And, I don't think that the President is saying that he's asking for a declaration of war, but then, we do have this constitutional power and authority that Congress needs to take of weighing in on whether or not we go to war. And, of course, in Vietnam, we sent in, lots of troops and advisors, and it was never really clear at what point then. There's still disagreement among people about at what point that was really full-blown war. So I think it'll be a bit unclear. But I think the point is that if we keep going down the road that we're going down of more troops, more airstrikes, so forth, we're ending up in a quagmire.
Well, on that note, our next question from John Cabral is, how do activists at home actually get House members or senators or their staff to actually dialogue? And are lobby and dialogue visits at home important?
Yes, absolutely. Very important to meet with members at home when they're there, or here if you can come here to talk to them when they're here, or even talking to the staff, making those phone calls, and sending in those emails. So anything that you can do to begin to reach out to your member of Congress. And as we always tell our WAND and WIL members, it's really about creating a relationship with the office. So there's lots of different avenues. It's trying to meet them in lots of different places is always a good thing. Getting to know the staff here in D.C. is important, but also getting to know the congressional staff at home and encountering, taking the opportunities of the town hall meetings and other opportunities where you might see the member of Congress or your senator at home is really important to start that dialogue and the relationship.
All right. Well, we had a couple of questions, or a couple of participants who asked for more details about the thunderclap. And just to say again what that is, the thunderclap is a tool that broadcasts a social media message through your Facebook, your Twitter, or your Tumblr. The thunderclap that we have for this week, as Kathy said, is about ending endless war. And to sign up for the thunderclap, you just click on the link and log in with your Facebook, your Twitter, or your Tumblr. And then tomorrow, November 13th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, it'll send out a message about ending war. And yes, the message that is up on the screen now. So we'll be sure to send that link out to you as well. And I just want to say thank you to Kathy and Julie for your very detailed and helpful presentation. And thanks to all of you who joined us at home. Please be on the lookout for, as I said, the follow-up materials, information about the thunderclap. And we'll be sure to keep you updated as the situation continues to develop in Congress. Thank you again, and with that, we will end the webinar.